say that it's Grant on the K2 meter, it's not quite as close a matchup as we've seen with other stuff. But and also where I'm not completely clear that we've had the same sort of, he always keeps his hand in his pocket routine with the K2 meters as we have for some other stuff.
Like the hand in the pocket or around the pocket for the jacket tug?
Exactly.
I'm thinking that it's this season that this high-tech stuff started happening, both of them, the K2 meter and the voices, and I've got to wonder if maybe they've been subject to a plant. Like, they always talk about Sci-Fi and Pilgrim had been very good. They've never pressured us to do anything or make it more exciting or anything like that. And let's just assume for a minute that everybody's on the level, except for the part where Grant isn't. And let's just say that these things that we suspect him of, and obviously the main reason why we would suspect him is partially because of the facts that are there, but it's also a lot to do with the fact that we suspect him of other things that are much more clear. And, those things aside, the facts that do exist, as you said, don't necessarily point to Grant. They could possibly point to a ghost or to Jay, or maybe between season 3 and season 4, they got a new cameraman who's a secret undercover hoaxer.
Yeah, I guess it's possible. Or just somebody who has a nervous habit of twiddling with his keys in his pocket.
Yes, or twiddling with the talk button on his walkie, and he happens to do it right when they're asking questions like, is it more than 5? Is it 6? There are 6 people in the room right now.
Yeah, exactly. So the K2 meter, for me, it's a Ouija board, but it doesn't even give you the anonymity of having multiple people subconsciously making the decision. I get the impression that one thing I would like to find out is, are Jay and Grant actually benefiting in any way financially from the sales of the K2 meter? This is what
that would be interesting.
Yeah, I make no accusation. I would like to say I am not making an accusation. I am being a jerk, and I am insinuating that there might be a motive for wanting people to go out there and buy these things.
Sure, and let's be very clear here. That is a perfectly legitimate question. It's not the insinuation or the accusation. That's a joke, or it's not entirely serious. We're trying to be open and fair-minded here. So, we're not saying that there is any connection. But
don't know.
It's a question worth asking, and if there was, even then that wouldn't necessarily prove anything, but it certainly wouldn't look good.
Right. So, but I do wonder why these things suddenly started appearing. Why after they really, it appeared in the Manson episode, but, a lot of things sort of happened in the Manson episode. That was a weird episode. Then it disappeared, and they sort of said a couple of things on the order of, well, it was sort of an interesting experiment, but we might not do it again. And then it started showing up again, and it immediately started giving them these amazing results. And I look back at myself, frankly, and shake my head a little bit, because I was trying to preserve their innocence. I was trying to come up with, okay, well, this could just be a statistical anomaly. They're only showing certain camera shots. It might be just that there's long pauses. No, the only real way that this is going off is either a ghost is doing it or somebody is doing this deliberately. And the thing is that there's no reason to think that ghosts, existing or not, can set off a K2 meter.
Yeah, when I first watched the Manson episode, I was really impressed. I looked at that and I was like, wow. This is some serious stuff. They have a device here that is clearly, very, very clearly giving answers to the questions being asked. And to my mind, there was no way that was coincidental. And people said, well, you don't know how long the delays were in between, or et cetera. But, I paid attention to the detail, and it really seemed to me that the pattern was too specific that it couldn't be just that people were all misinterpreting it as a Ouija board, like you said. It looked like they really were getting real responses that could not be coincidental. And then you had the whole thing with the temperature dropping. And that's actually one of the things that triggered me to start skepticalviewer.com, because I went to the sci-fi boards and I was talking to people about that. And the first thing I noticed is people are saying that the FLIR footage is doctored, and you can go to the site and click on the link for the doctored FLIR footage, but leave it at the fact that there was clearly some editing done in order to make the temperature match up with what they were saying it was, and who did the editing or why the editing was done, we couldn't say. But the other thing was people were talking about how that K2 meter was in someone's hand the whole time, and they were saying that it has to be because someone has to hold the button down because otherwise it's off. And if they let go of the button for even a second, or their thumb gets, they loosen up the pressure and then they push it back, it basically cycles through a power on, which gives each LED lights up in a row, twice in a row. And it looked like that might have been some of the responses that they were actually getting while this was going on. Mm-hmm. And in the subsequent episodes, they specifically said, we didn't like the K2 meter for a number of reasons, and one of the things that they went to, they didn't specifically say, but it was understood that they were talking about that power switch, that they didn't like the fact that someone had to hold it. Now, when they did bring it back, they did solve that in their own little way. No one's holding it by the power switch, so no one is manually turning it on and off to get that cycle up thing. So, that could be their rationalization for bringing it back, and that's somewhat legitimate. But as you said, the evidence they were getting, it just seemed too good. It just seemed like if they weren't creating that evidence, it just seemed like maybe they should wonder why they're getting that evidence and if maybe somebody in their group is creating it.
Yeah. And the problem is that the K2 meter is not a particularly directional piece of equipment, as far as I can tell. You can be on any side of it and trigger it. I'd like to talk to an electrical engineer or something like that to figure out when they were talking, say, to the little boy, and they said, come right up to this light and really make it go off for a while. That's not a straight linear scale. That's like almost a logarithmic scale or something. It goes up to like 40 milligauss on the far end, which a lot of people on various boards were saying, well, I believe in the paranormal and all that, but that seems a little high to me. And so maybe Jay and Grant are just contacting uniquely powerful ghosts. What I would like to know is if this is being set off by a cell phone or by a walkie-talkie. Can we figure out where that walkie-talkie was? Is there a maximum distance that it can be and still set it off like that?
Interesting. I think Grant said something about 15 feet when he did talk about the walkies, and he said, oh, yes, we know about that, but we're careful, or whatever. I thought he said 10 to 15 feet. Somebody else said like 50 or 60 feet, but I don't know if they were talking about a cell phone or something else. But one way or another. Also we do have the possibility of other devices such as the car keys. I think that the walkie would be a little conspicuous for the reason that everyone else on the team would hear the walkie clicking, unless, I guess, you could switch to a different channel on some of these. So if they switch to a different channel right before they did it, whoever was doing it, if someone is, they could click away and no one would hear it. The car keys would be even less conspicuous. The cell phone might set it off, but I don't see how you'd effectively pull a hoax off like that. Like, what are you, sending a text message every time somebody asks a question?
Or you could call somebody.
Yeah, I guess you just hit the talk button twice and do a redial.
Yeah, doesn't seem too likely to me. It doesn't seem like the sort of, like you'd get the kind of play, but once again, you'd have to buy one of these things, and
call your voicemail.
Yeah, I guess you could. I was originally going to just buy one of these and experiment with it, but the idea of just lining the pockets of whoever it is that's doing this and buying, frankly, an overpriced, useless piece of junk, it was a little too much for me. I really wanted to do it, but I just couldn't.
Well, that about does it for this episode of the Skeptical Viewer podcast. And for all you guys out there, thanks for listening. Thanks for hanging out on the site, skepticalviewer.com. Thanks for participating in the discussion. And if you don't participate in the discussion, thanks for lurking, because you're part of the site too. And I'm really excited. It's gotten to be